In today's video, I'm going to be replacing my $10,000 iMac Pro with this, the base model 24-inch M1 iMac that costs $1,300. The iMac Pro has been a workstation for me, producing nearly every single video on this channel for about a year and a half now, but today it is going to be taking a backseat to literally the cheapest M1 iMac money can buy. So the big question is, does this thing have the chops? Whether you're buying the new M1 iMac or waiting to switch from your old Windows device, make sure your digital life is protected with today's sponsor, Total AV. Total AV is an award-winning antivirus and malware detection service with advanced protection from online hackers and scams such as those endlessly irritating phishing websites. You know how every time you go to download a YouTube video, there's 700 different advertisements telling you to download a new update for Adobe Flash Player, even though there is no such thing as Adobe Flash Player anymore? Yeah, those kinds of things are what Total AV protects against. Total AV is constantly monitoring to protect you from hackers and threats, but they'll also notify you if your personal information gets leaked in a data breach. This kind of stuff happens all the time. Just a few weeks ago, the company that my university used for our graduation was hacked, and someone spent like $300 on Fashion Nova on my credit card and I had to get it canceled. It was a whole ordeal. That's exactly what Total AV is monitoring for. Right now, you can snag their impressive $19 antivirus package, a remarkable 80% savings over their normal rate. To redeem this offer, head over to totalav.com/LukeMiani or click the link in the description below. And now let's get on with the video. You join me right after I've just finished filming the video with that guy, the base model iMac. And right here is my exact opposite of a base model iMac. This is basically the most expensive iMac that you could buy, and I'm gonna basically try to swap them. So this is my 18-core iMac Pro, and when it was new, it would have cost over $10,000. I was the second owner of this. I bought it for half of that, a little over $5,000, which is still a lot of money, but 10 grand is a lot for an iMac, and this is not even 3 years old, and I'm gonna be trying to use a $1,300 base model to replace it. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting the M1 iMac to perform on the same level as this. That would be insane. It's basically the top-of-the-line iMac, the most powerful one you can buy. It has the 18-core Xeon W2191B, 128 gigabytes of DDR4 2666 MHz RAM, 2 terabytes of storage, and the then maxed out Vega 64 graphics with 16 gigabytes of HBM2 VRAM. When new, including AppleCare, this would have cost $11,000. So let me know in the comments below. Do you think I paid a fair price for a machine with these specs in 2019? I think I did, but today I'm going to be replacing it with this, the cheapest M1 iMac that you can buy. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Luke, that's a bit of a step down, don't you think? You're going from 128 to 8 gigabytes of RAM and an eighth of the storage. But I'm actually not super concerned about having such less storage because I edit on an external RAID array. I've got this 48 terabyte Thunderbolt drive that I plug in, and that's where all of my videos are stored, so it really won't be any difference. I'm just plugging it into something else. Although, granted, the big concern of mine is that in plugging in the storage that I need to do my job, I use up 50% of the ports on the M1 iMac. Also, I don't have an SD card slot, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. So why don't we just go ahead and switch these things around, and I'm going to start editing the video that you've already seen. All right, we're getting in here about 7 minutes into the video, and I'm starting to bring the M1 to its knees here. There's a lot of layers going on here. So if we come down to the timeline, this is all unrendered footage, by the way, or actually you can see the render is catching up because it's really, really fast. But we've got my base 4K footage, and then we've got 4K sped up footage of Cinebench, which has a Gaussian blur applied to it. And then on top of that, we have a chart, and that has a drop shadow, and there's transitions between them. And only with that much going on am I starting to lose frames here. You can see the playhead is jumping and we're dropping some frames. But that's a lot going on, and it's just starting to struggle, and there are no fans at all. This is really impressive. After editing the first iMac video, I then worked on the iPad Pro video you guys saw on Saturday. Okay, so I accidentally shot the end of my iPad Pro video in 60 FPS. Now, usually, once I go ahead and apply my color correction to it, on the iMac Pro, it grinds to a screeching halt, and playback is basically nothing. Oh my goodness. I'm not dropping frames at 60 FPS 4K. And look at this, folks. This is the exact same setting I use on my iMac Pro. Better performance, optimized original. What the hell? This doesn't make any sense! It doesn't make any sense! Ah! And after that, I worked on the iMac versus iMac comparison you saw on Sunday. I've now edited my last 3 major videos on the 24-inch base model iMac, and I have to say, I'm staggered. It's genuinely unbelievable that I was able to get so much done on a machine so much cheaper than my iMac Pro. If you look at the brand new purchase price of both of these machines, this guy is like 1/10 of the price. And honestly, it did not feel like 1/10 of the computer. But obviously, given the huge disparities between these two iMacs, there were areas where the difference was noticeable. The first thing was RAM. After getting deep into a video, I definitely started to notice the RAM being stretched quite thin. It's not uncommon for my RAM usage to be up to 90 gigabytes on the iMac Pro when editing in Final Cut, and here I'm trying to make do with just 8 total. Another area that I noticed the limitations of the M1 was in render and export times. Final Cut is extremely well optimized for Apple Silicon, but it's hard to beat the raw horsepower of 18 cores and a beefy GPU. There's also a bug that I've encountered not just on this particular iMac, but on every M1 device I've tested, and it's really annoying. Inexplicably, out of nowhere, the audio just stops playing. You can see I can turn up the volume. It's not muted. I just don't have audio. It fixes itself after a little while, or I can just go ahead and quit out of Final Cut and then open it up again, which, by the way, is ridiculously fast to open up this library, and then the audio is back. While it's worth noting that it took up. But that happens several times when editing a video, and it's really irritating. I am curious, if you're a Final Cut Pro user and you use an M1 Mac, have you noticed this issue? If so, how often does it happen, and how do you fix it? I haven't found a reliable way to fix it every time apart from relaunching Final Cut Pro. This is clearly a software issue, but Apple really needs to get on it. Setting that annoyance aside, the craziest part about this whole experiment was the outstanding performance in the timeline. It was actually better than the iMac Pro. I genuinely can't believe it. I went back and forth to make sure I had everything standardized, and yeah, I can't explain it. But to give you an idea just how crazy it was, let's run through some benchmarks comparing these two devices. It's gonna be a bit of a bloodbath. Starting with Cinebench R23, the M1 just can't compete with the sheer number of cores. The same thing applies in Geekbench, as well as in Geekbench Compute. Similarly, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the Vega 64 walks all over the M1 GPU. Also in Blender, both in the BMW render and the longer and therefore more demanding classroom test. This is also compounding the fact that the M1 has to run through Rosetta, whereas the Intel iMac Pro doesn't have to do any of that. However, in Final Cut Pro, things get much closer. Rendering a 10-minute, 10-bit clip takes less time on the iMac Pro, but the gap isn't anywhere near as wide. But when we consider these numbers and the fact that the iMac Pro absolutely annihilates the M1 in every single benchmark, it makes it all the more surprising how good of an experience it was to edit on this iMac. And yeah, it definitely does take way longer to render and export compared to the iMac Pro, but when actually working with the footage, it is phenomenal given the price point of this iMac. That being said, I did have a number of gripes with the 24-inch iMac that got on my nerves. Number one, you may have noticed the Logitech speakers on my desk. I use these for editing and general audio listening, but since the iMac has a headphone jack on the side, the wire looks absolutely dreadful when plugged in. Also, the iMac Pro has a UHS 2 SD card slot, which I absolutely adore. For the first video, I had to use a random USB SD card adapter, and it was painfully slow. It took over 40 minutes to import footage that would normally take me about 4 minutes. Not to mention the fact that it also consumed my one remaining Thunderbolt port because the other one is occupied by my 48 terabyte storage drive, which is where I do all of my video editing. So I had no ports left. And so on day 2 of using this device, it drove me to just buy this Anker Thunderbolt dock. Now this thing is made mainly for laptops because it has 85 watts of power delivery through its Thunderbolt connection, and it also has DisplayPort and HDMI for connecting it to monitors, but given that it still works with the iMac, it was really nice to have this to plug in Ethernet, multiple USBs, a couple more Type-Cs, as well as critically, that SD card slot that I had really been missing. And it's also nice that I can just have this on the desk and not have to reach around behind the iMac to plug in the SD card. I really like this Thunderbolt hub. It's not as expensive as some of the other ones. It's like $180 or something like that. I'll have it linked in the description below if you want to check it out. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Luke, you said this was a review of the base model, and you've gone and added nearly $200 to the cost. Why didn't you just go for the mid-tier at that point? Well, if I had gone for the mid-tier, I still would have needed to get an SD card reader, and in this case, I've also got Ethernet, as well as, look at that, 2 USB-C ports, exactly what I would have had with the mid-tier iMac. So I still ended up spending less than the mid-tier iMac, and I got many more ports besides. But setting all that aside, the big question for this video was, would I be able to dump the $10,000 iMac Pro and use a base model $1,300 iMac instead? Well, the fact that this iMac is still in the primary editing slot should tell you a lot. I'm actually going to keep using this thing for this video as well as however many more videos I can go until some of the annoyances catch up with me and I want to switch back. Granted, I'll admit, part of the reason that I like using this thing is the novelty of a new machine with a new design. I really like the form factor of this iMac, and I've really grown to like it quite a bit, but eventually it's possible that the slower render times, the slower export times, the smaller amount of RAM, as well as the slower SD card reader might drive me back to the iMac Pro. But if there's one thing that I've definitely learned from this experiment, it's that whatever Apple's got in store next for the iMac will almost certainly mean I'm selling the iMac Pro. And that's pretty impressive because $10,000, $1,300. It's crazy. I'm curious to know what you think. Were you surprised at how good or bad the 24-inch iMac was in this test? Do you think you could use the 24-inch iMac for your workflow? Let me know those things in the comments down below, and as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.